It
I want to
was,
know. I want
yeah,
to know
go.
if there's ever been a single sailing race where you didn't have to sail through a finish line. Anyways, yeah, carry on.
There's got to be a finish line of some sort, right? Not the result, this P8, which is, then obviously not where you want to be, but most people say that's where you should be as a new team. I know a lot of the teams have sat in the basement for a long time, but it's a build in progress, right? Team going. But on your Instagram feed afterward, Taylor, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned that back to the drawing board for Bermuda, which is the next event in May. So what does that mean? How do you, what is on the drawing board, and what's on the table for you guys to look at, and how to change and get things a little bit better for the next event?
Yeah, it's disappointing for sure, and we're I don't know. I'm a very competitive person, so to be towards the back of the pack, it's kind of been a while since I've been that far back in kind of any boats that I've been sailing. But the reality is this is hard, and it's going to take time. Looking back on it, we're probably at a total of, I don't know, we can probably count on two hands the amount of hours that we have foiling the boat. So yeah, we need to not only get as many minutes as we can on the water at these events, but we got to start looking at how we can improve when we're not at these events. We have access to all this data with SailGP, and it's hugely beneficial. And just looking at how other teams are sailing the boats and where we can improve is going to be, there's room for, I guess, gains off the water as well.
And what from that data do you think? Where can you start? I mean, there's a lot to look at on all this data stuff, but I mean, is there what would be the top three things that you really intentionally want to go dive into to sort of start this process?
Yeah, I think that for one, everyone is sailing the boat so differently. Every role on the boat is obviously so important, and I kind of mentioned that in my little recap of the event, where all six people are so important and need to be just in this like perfect synchrony. Mike talks about it being like an orchestra where everything just needs to like boop 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 boop, like happening all at the same time, and especially with the communication and just how quickly things happen. Everyone needs to be so sharp and just doing their jobs, and some jobs more complex in certain situations. So I think we really need to dissect like where people are, the most loaded in the race, and how we can get them to achieve, a higher level at that moment. Whether it's unloading them with someone else on the boat, or them just trying to, or just figuring out how to manage their time and their role a little bit better in those tough moments.
And how about you, Mr. Buckley, CEO? What's on the drawing board for you? How do you reorganize things without shaking up too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the competitor in all of us, like Taylor said, is disappointed, right? But when you take a step back and you really think about, how many hours we don't have and how many hours the other teams do have, we're actually probably above where we should be, right? Like, we beat two teams. We beat the best team in the world, the Australians, and the Danish, who have been on the grid since the start. We didn't leave with hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage that we caused to our boat, and we didn't hurt anybody. And the competitor in me says that's a cop out, and that's not the way I've raced my whole life or gone about things my whole life. But you just have to be realistic and give credit where credit's due. Like these other teams are awesome. They put in the work, they put in the time. We jumped in mid-season. The US team has not had great results over the years. So we're in the realm of where other teams have been, and we have no time on the water. We've had a little bit of bad luck losing practice days here and there. It seems to be on day one when we got on, they reset all the software for us in Dubai and handed us this beautiful boat with all brand new software. And Taylor turns the keys on, and I kind of call it the wing went into self-destruct mode, right? It was like doing that, and that's literally how we started day one. And so we've just kind of been, reeling from that. So I don't think any major changes. We just all have to do our own jobs a fraction of a bit, better in the critical times. Like right now, we're seeing that when the wind is steady and, we're in the kind of on the correct foils for that amount of wind and the correct wing for that amount of wind, and it's, flat water, we can race with these other teams, right? On practice day, we were right in the mix in 3s and 4s. But then on a day where you're in big foils and uprange and you make a little mistake and, the rudder jumps out or cavitates or whatever, like we're not there yet, like to put it into kind of regular sailing terms, it's like you're stuck, you're in a J2 and the breeze comes up. We're all good enough sailors where you move the lead back, you flatten it out, you make the J2 into a J3. We don't have those tools in our tool bag right now to do that. So if it's just straight up J2 sailing or J1 or whatever, you're in range, we're okay. We can compete. But anything outside of that, that's where we start to, struggle. So I don't think it's any major changes. It's just, head down and getting more time.
Yeah, what do you say? You said it's like hopping into an F1 car, never race in the wet.
Yeah.
When it's raining.
Yeah.
A lot of the teams weren't used to sailing those conditions either with the configuration that we had, and we hopped into it, never having done it. And like small little changes, like just 2 degrees, less camber on your wing, unloads the helm, it, unloads the handles a little bit on the wing sheet. So like just these little tiny micro adjustments that we're looking to just narrow in on make a huge difference.
It was kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word, but to hear some of the other real experienced people come off the water and say, yeah, that was loose out there, and you're like, yeah, you should come on our boat, right? But to hear them, and they were serious, right? And they weren't, again, like they weren't used to sailing in that configuration and that much wind. So it was, we got a fair bit to go to get a little more comfortable.
And so what you're talking about was and this is the sort of daily decision, right, with the race organizers to tell you what everybody's going in. It was that having had the first day canceled because of the man was on the race course, and all of a sudden you got this compressed day. Do you feel like there's a little bit of apprehension for them to sort of make decisions too early? Things are just decisions happening late on the race committee side to get everybody on the same setup and ready.
I mean, it's a huge call, the configuration every day, and I think Russell makes the final call on that. And I can't imagine having that much pressure. I remember we showed up when Taylor and Ryan and I showed up to Los Angeles on the final day, and we had a bunch of potential investors there and our bankers. And the forecast was for light wind, and so Russell, morning of called, or I think maybe even night before, has to do this, called big wing, big foils, and we show up in the morning and it is ripping. And it's over the engineering loads, right? And he was going through this, do we call, and I'm thinking we're in the adrenaline lounge, and I'm thinking, oh my God, if they have to call this, what do I say to these investors and our bankers? Like, because they're not sailors, and they're like, well, isn't this beautiful wind? And like, why aren't you? And the wind just came down enough. But yeah, that call is so critical. And he works with, the forecasters the night before.
And they actually made the call. They make the call the night before generally, and then they have the option to tweak it a little bit. But going into day 2, they actually left 8 of the 10 boats in the water. Oh. So there was no option to change in the morning, and that was it. Everyone was committed, and we were racing with what we had.
And I imagine it's pretty hard to call the wind anyway in these venues, because they're all kind of tucked up under weird close to shore locations, and sometimes it's hard to get that kind of accuracy in the breeze. But it is what it is. Everybody's on the same equipment, but and there was a lot of talk about being loose. What is it like when you are out of range, Taylor, driving the boat, when you're kind of in this sort of setup that's not perfect for the breeze? Is it, when you say a little loose, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's just everything's a little bit unforgiving. We're on these massive span foils, enormous, and the big rudders as well. And yeah, I think we had a top speed of 46.5 knots on racing on Saturday or Sunday, sorry. And for those foils to be reaching that speed is almost incredible. Like basically the ventilation is forming around your foils as you're creeping up those speeds. And yeah, any small mistake and with your ride height, or even sometimes just the board dropping into the water and disrupting the flow that's going over the rudders, if you're not at that like perfect height for that, it can completely wash the rudders out, which we saw in a pretty crucial jibe after Mark 1, where we just totally lost the rudders and it would just washed out and you lose grip and boat gets really unstable and turning in weird directions, and yeah, you lose complete steerage of the boat. And yeah, going 40 knots and not having any control is something that takes a little while to get used to.
What's the easiest way to get the boat under control? Where some of the risks might be. Is it just a sort of a quick whip of the rudders to get the flow attached or something, or how do you get out of it quickly when it's going bad?
Yeah, I'll let you know when I figure it out. No, it's you're just trying to massage the thing back into control, and get the rudder, just the flow of the water to just slightly regrip, and then you can turn the boat where you want. But yeah, it's hard though. It's hard to know when it's going to happen. It's hard to correct it when it happens. And then just even like a tiny comms issue, I'm happy to say that, like I don't even know, maybe I did say like your boat, because Mike drives out of the maneuvers, and yeah, so like the fact that he grabbed the wheel when I'm trying to correct it is like just that moment when you might have a split second to like just reattach the flow and kind of save it and stay on the foils, and then that moment disappears if you don't. So
it's tricky because we don't know. We both knew that the grip went, and so the wheel starts kind of doing this, and it's pretty hard to tell if that's him doing that to the wheel or the turbulence in the water doing it to the wheel. So we're like kind of fighting each other. Wasn't very good.
So let's get that. I mean, so to your new role in the strat. Well, hey, nice. You got to sail your first event, which is awesome. So you get to get out of this C-suite and onto the boat, which is, I'm sure you said.
I sailed in Sydney on the second day.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So first full speed sailing here.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's awesome, right? I mean, it's the best sailing in the world, and to be able to sail with Taylor and Victor, who I've done a lot of sailing with and against over the years, and obviously the rest of our team, and Anna and PK and Ben and Mac, like and Leo, it's awesome. But it's we're all trying to figure out if we do the exact same things that the other teams are doing, how are you going to pass them, right? Right, because we're never going to gain more days than them. There's too big of a head start, so we've got to kind of think outside the box a little bit. And at the beginning, you hear Taylor talk a lot about unloading people or loading people, and one of the biggest problems right now is Taylor and Victor are out of their comfort zone, right? Like that they're, when's the last time Taylor's been uncomfortable driving a boat? Probably, when he was 6, and probably not even then. And so now all of a sudden you've got all this new stuff happening all at once. And so kind of the concept is if they can just focus on driving and trimming the wing, and Mac on flight, then that might speed up our learning curve, right? And I don't know that I'm the long-term solution, but at least Taylor and I know how to, we have a long history of communicating together, and we're kind of giving it a go.
So your first take as the strategist, for a full weekend, I mean, I guess still only one day, right? What were your takeaways in how you call the race? Same thing by trying to focus on your job, and we're dealing with comms and kind of dealing with the chaos. Where you feel like were you on game, or are you still trying to figure it out on that one day?
No, it's funny on Sunday in Sydney. I felt really on my game actually. It was a pretty straightforward race course. It was like, I don't know, 13 knots, like pretty steady. Kind of one and in or two and in, kind of, very straightforward course. And this course was, really tight to the grandstands, and there was a huge rock barrier in the middle of the race course. And so it was like a reverse funnel, and everybody jumped into the funnel at the reach mark. And like now you're all going down the same little narrow path. And, I think that added, like I said earlier, we're okay when it's like pretty standard. And right now, when you throw these new things at us that are like above and beyond, that's when it's like, oh shit, right? So yeah, no, I don't think I did a very good job. We're learning, myself, Taylor, and Victor, like how to really communicate with noise canceling headphones, right? And when somebody else is talking, it means that we can't talk, or can't hear each other, and things are happening so fast. And that's something, our partners at Red Bull are going to work with us on, military communication, so that we can get the whole team on that. Like Taylor and I are pretty decent at that, but could be better. And, just that ability to just have one word, there's no time to, hey, what do you think? Hey, you like the top right? Like, there's just no time for it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a big focus area for us is how we communicate and how we do it in the, kind of intense moments of the race.
Speaking of intense moment, the start, which to be fair to the Danes, there's this telemetry problem that is starting to come out a little bit. I mean, I think you probably seemed a little bit of you're a little pissed off that you got taken out of it, but it's kind of no fault of his own. But this sort of goes to this reliance on the equipment, both the foils and the telemetry and everything else, and the race software of things working for you to be able to make smart decisions, to be able to sail the course clean. But what happened in that start from your perspective, and is there any way around that when this telemetry stuff fails, or was it a known failure before the start that they were kind of coming into it blind?
I'll comment on it. Yeah, so there is a rule where if a boat's telemetry is off and they're jumping around in the umpire app and also like on the other race boat screens, that they're technically not allowed to race.
Oh,
as we saw, it can be quite dangerous, and it's really hard at times for the other boats to know where the other boats are, or us to know where the other boats are if they're not on our screen. There's a lot of blind spots on this boat, so really hard to see through your wing sail at times. So yeah, I mean, coming into that start, I guess on a personal level, I'm looking at the wing screen for like all the start data and the time to kill and how much time we have and where we are on our ley lines, and to not be able to see that Canada was coming in at 30, 35 knots behind us and about to overlap us to windward, caught me off guard. And I think Mike was probably the first one to see them and kind of say something on the boat. And I didn't see them, until they came into my peripheral vision. And, you're just not expecting a boat to windward of you to just come smashing into the windward side of your boat. So, yeah, granted they had nowhere to go, but the fact that they weren't showing up on our screen, which I was looking at, also makes it, really difficult for me to kind of preemptively avoid something like that. We were in a pretty good spot, and our time on distance was, looking like it was going to be set up well. And we already had a boat to leeward of us, but with a nice gap, not big enough for any other boats to go in. So I wasn't worried that, someone was going to come screeching in from behind and hook us. So yeah, to get smashed into and then, push closer to the Germans and kind of stopped in our tracks for a second, obviously put us, that 2 seconds back. And then the Germans held us up, and, there's no option to accelerate. So yeah, from that point on, it's those 2 seconds are gone just like that. And, that's the difference between, leading our top three at reach Mark 1 to being out the back.
Mm. And that's, I think most people probably don't realize that in that pre-start that you're, this wing screen, you're sailing less, looking out of the boats, and more or less looking almost like a video game of positioning of the boats in a lot of ways then.
Yeah, I mean, we have the positioning of the boats on our wing screen, so
right.
that's the bonus of that. But I think we were in a position where we almost didn't need to worry about us getting hooked, and we were just kind of time on distance, racing our own boat at that point. But yeah, to kind of just get smashed into, in a matter of 1 second from when I saw him to them hitting our bow was definitely threw off the whole routine, and something that's really unexpected. And in the end, obviously very dangerous, because Canada ended up hitting 3 boats within a matter of a minute, from 30 seconds till the start till a minute after the start. They hit 3 boats, including Australia, in that mark collision, which no one really knew that they actually touched each other in that situation.
Yeah, that was full chaos. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, David, it is just sailing, and yes, we have a screen with the other boats, but if you're the windward boat on a start line and you see no other boats, they're probably all to leeward of you through your wing or your sails or whatever, right? I mean, I think it's like, that to me is one of the biggest takeaways. Is I was pretty surprised kind of at the excuse, like, we had no telemetry. Well, like, okay, fair enough, but like, that you're racing against 9 other boats, and that none of them are to the right of you. They're probably all down there. You probably shouldn't put the bow down and kind of go ripping down there. But it is just sailing at the end of the day. Sometimes your Velocitech or your Vaqueros or whatever you use, like, doesn't work at a start, and you got to get back to the basics of, a line sight and time and distance and all that sort of stuff. Like, I think that stuff all applies here too.
Is it hard though? The Canadians came in from behind, right? It's almost, I was thinking also with the French on that start had that amazing full swing shot around the bottom. And so sometimes it's hard to see who's coming from behind as well. And that's almost just as unpredictable as both other side of you, but it's tricky where they're coming from all directions and you're trying to go forward.
Yeah. Oftentimes at 40 knots and all these blind spots. So it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah. So what about that?
Taylor's always been, I think one of the major reasons he's been so successful driving and match racing, and I think the reason he's going to be successful here is his ability to put the bow down, when the other boat's putting the bow up, and he's a second earlier to put his bow down to roll over them, or a second earlier to get them out of sync. And he just has this kind of sixth sense of scent of like when to just push that fraction of a second. And in this kind of racing and an M32s, that's the difference between breaking the overlap by the offset leg or not, and rounding on the outside.
Was this race course, we'll get into sort of race by race, but it seemed like, I mean, that the distance after Mark 1 was pretty limited. Like you said, there was basically it was a 1-lane road. Was there some cases where it might actually be better to be lured in late, knowing that's kind of the setup late where you can have an earlier job and not get stuck on the outside?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reach in this race course is actually quite small as well. And then the distance from Mark 1 to boundary was really short.
Yeah.
And like Mike said, we all had to go to the one side of the
rock,
the barrier in the middle of the course, the rocks or the reef or whatever it was. So yeah, I mean, it made it more congested, and being up the line was high risk, but I think that there was the ability to start up the line and get to the reach mark in 3rd or 4th, and in this fleet, that's an awesome place to be.
It was tricky because you had to go to the right side of that rock in the middle of the race course, but depending on how wide you got at the reach mark, the boats on the outside would hit the boundary of the grandstands and be entitled to jibe. And so if you were, like it was a fine line, because if you were on the inside and you weren't making the rock, you had to go up and around it, which then you're just last, or try to soak below it and you're going slow. I mean, it was again, watch what happened with the Aussies. Like it was hectic in there.
Yeah. Well, I get to that. I mean, that was one thing I said to, I forget if I was watching with that. Is, to me, it's crazy with these robotic marks that they're finish marks. They can be off the course. They don't really need to be there. I know they sort of like to have everything in play. Was that maybe discussed amongst the team and with Russell after the fact of trying to clear out some of the marks from just to take them out of play?
I know, I know a few of the guys. I know Outer Ridge was pretty upset about the marks being there, and I'm sure Tom was as well. It's yeah, they kind of is what it was. They were there, so
everybody at the same mark.
Yeah, get it.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of marks, that mark was taken out, obviously. And when I was watching the broadcast, it was even mentioned by them that they had a race community boat on station, like most sailors would know. And that's the finish line. As far as every SailGP race I've seen, you have to sail through some sort of finished gate. On that race one, there were some that went through the gate, some that didn't. What's the story there? Because it was never spoken of again.
Which teams didn't get through the gate, Dave? Do you remember?
I want to know. I want to know if there's ever been a single sailing race where you didn't have to sail through a finish line. Anyways, yeah, carry on.
There's got to be a finish line of some sort, right?
Yeah.
I noticed the first three went through, then the second two did not, right? I have to go back and look. And then you guys crossed what I would say properly, but then we're scored last in that race. So what's how do you get your points back on that?
Well, we've submitted we've challenged the scores. So I guess we'll hear from Russell in the coming days. But yeah, I mean it's a pretty poor precedent to set that somebody can just hand out move boats around into a position that they believe is fair. That doesn't really work in sport. So yeah, we've lodged a complaint and we'll see what they have to say. Obviously for us, the difference between getting 7th or 9th in that race isn't the end of the world, but over the next few years we intend to be competing at the top, and I think it's important to kind of know where things stand now, because you don't want to have something like that happen. We saw what happened in Formula One with the race official making a rule up and letting Max come through and beat Lewis on the last lap of the World Championship, and that's put a pretty big scar on F1.
There's a lot of the chatter from the race comms, or I know you see it on your wing thing. Was it clear that the race finish was set up between this stand-on boat and the mark, or was there just too much going on already to even remember it?
Yeah, I mean they said it over the comms as well during the race, which all the teams get. Yeah, it's hectic. It's hard to hear, but every team has a coach in their booth able to talk to them. There was nothing to leeward of that mark, until the grandstands. So yeah, knowing those facts, the fact that there's a boat with a pink flag on one end and nothing on the other side is, I don't know, I'd say pretty telling that, that's probably your finish line.
Probably so, yeah. Huh.
They also came on after and told Nathan that and I believe the other boat that they'd finished on the wrong side. I actually thought they went around and corrected themselves after.
Yeah,
I don't think so. Germans.
Yeah, the Germans that sailed back through the line, but I don't think they still did their string rule technically. But anyway, I guess they'll sort that one out. The other thing I have a question is,
call you as a witness, Dave.
Right, yeah. We'll get Dave Perry on here to kind of revisit that one. He'd sort it. On the press conference, I know this is obviously a big thing about SailGP is the league. This is what you bought into, building storylines and things like that. But I do have to ask, this sort of setting you guys up as the villain, as they did in the press conference, and honestly, I didn't know that there was such this dislike for U.S. sailors in New Zealand. I thought we were all compatible, we were good, but I mean, what's that all about? I mean, you guys really the villains in this thing?
I mean, haters are just fans.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they try to create these rivalries and in the banter in the league, and truthfully, it's a lot of it's fun, and it's probably good for the league in the end, and good for the press. And yeah, I'm in the end, like we're confident in our team and in our abilities, and we're not going to get pushed around. So it's yeah, despite our massive learning progress we're going through right now, it's we're not going to just roll over for a more veteran team. So I think that's important. I think everyone on the team would agree that we're gonna fight for every inch in every race, and it doesn't matter who's in your way.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun to be the underdog, right? I mean, there's a pretty famous quote, that one of the former SailGP drivers said at an America's Cup, and imagine if they lost from here, right? That's how we look at it, right? We're going to keep fighting, and we believe that we deserve to be there, and not going to spend a whole lot of time worried about whether anyone else thinks we deserve to be there. We are there.
You're there, right?
Yeah, and it's if they're talking about you, that's probably a good thing. And we're gonna just try to keep getting better. And I think that's what makes this so much fun. Is like there's just so much to learn, right? Like we left Sunday night, Taylor, Victor, I, and Mark are in a hotel room till I don't even know what time it was, 12 or 12:30, I think. Maybe it wasn't quite that late, I don't know, but late into the night, like just like going through how we can be better. And it's been a while in my career. I'm getting older. Since I've like laid in bed, for hours on end thinking about like what we can do. It's just like it's addicting, all these things we can learn, and it's like it's a huge privilege to have this in our life right now, and we gotta we gotta capitalize on it.
So you've got you mentioned this is the downtime, right? You got between here and Bermuda, it's not a lot of time. But what do you really, Mike, what do you want to dive into? Is it more sailing? Is it just looking at the I mean, how do you get it done in this short time frame?
Well, in between events, I kind of focus on two things. I focus on the business and then how we can improve, our sailing performance. I stopped in LA on my way home and spent the day at our partners at Red Bull, and a big part of that was around, how we could develop different training protocols in between Grand Prix that we could be improving, right? How could we be improving comms, on a day like today, right, where we don't have an F50? And so they're working on a plan there, right? I mean, the first thing out of their mouth was, we've done this in the past with some of our other race teams and Red Bull athletes, like, let's get you with a SEAL team, entering a kill house, and you're like, holy shit, right? But like, yeah, if you can communicate, in those sort of settings, really efficiently, then when you go out on the water, that's it becomes really easy. So it's awesome to have them as a resource. And then on the business side, we're searching for that perfect title partner, right? I mean, that's most of my time right now is meeting with CXOs and sharing, kind of how cool SailGP is, right? And what's been interesting is, with kind of in our previous endeavors, trying to raise money and corporate money, it's pretty hard to get a call back, like really hard, from even like a low level, person at a company. And what we're finding in SailGP is, I'm getting calls back from CEOs that are like, okay, wow, this is cool. This is, you guys stand on your own 2 feet, with F1 and other sports properties, and it's new and sexy and unique and sustainable. And how many global professional sports league are men and women competing with and against each other? Probably none. Maybe there's a couple, but yeah. So that's kind of that's what my weeks are like in between.
All right. So final question: what do you think about Bermuda? Is it the same race course, same venue as the America's Cup, or what's? To be honest, don't know much about the venue. I haven't heard much on the promo side, but for those looking to book a ticket to Bermuda, what's do you got any details to share?
I think it's a lot of the same. Definitely going to go back and watch, every minute of SailGP racing they've had there, and probably every minute of America's Cup racing they've had there. make sure that we, know the race course and we're ready to go. But yeah, I believe the course is same vicinity as America's Cup. And yeah, I think we're, really focusing on generally to, somewhat windy, flat water venue. And, we'll just go back and dig deep into the data from, other events that were like that, including Bermuda in the past, and just see, what we can draw from it. But yeah, reality is, we just need to sail the boat better too. We probably in the end only operated at our for our level, like a 40%, and we didn't execute. And, we need to get those numbers up to 80%. And we think that, our 80% is good enough to be in races already. So we just need to go out there and execute under the pressure.
Okay. I know and most people say the last question, but I'll follow up to that one. That, I mean, in terms of your potential, and you're only, what, 3 events now? Have I lost track already? Are you at the potential that you maybe thought you were going to be at by now, or where are you relative to that in a realistic way?
If you're really being realistic,
really realistic, yeah.
Yeah, if you turn off Taylor's competitive side, which is basically impossible, so he's not going to admit this, but we're where we thought we would be. Or I actually thought there was a pretty high chance we'd get last at our first event or second event. Like, knock on wood, we haven't been last yet. And we're sitting we moved up in the standings. We went from 7th to 6th in the overall standings. So, but like Taylor said, I think the reason we left Christchurch like a little bit more frustrated than the previous was we felt like we didn't sail at the level we could kind of in the moment, right? Like we know we can't sail the boat perfectly right now, but we thought our level was a little bit higher. We had 2 tacks and a jibe that cost us 15 points, right? 3 maneuvers that literally cost us 15 or 17 points. And so that's a tough pill to swallow, because we know we can do a good enough tack. We can do a foiling tack, and we just didn't execute 2 of them. And that's a bummer. But yeah, we're kind of right where we should be.
All right. Well, good stuff.
I got one more thing, Dave.
Yes, go.
We've got New York coming up, and we don't like to look ahead too far ahead. Obviously, we're focused on Bermuda right now, but our first home race is going to be New York City, June 22nd, 23rd. And, as many people know, Taylor and I have been kind of, really fighting for Americans in American sailing the last few years pretty loudly. And, we would love to share with the American sailing community how much fun and cool a Sail Grand Prix race weekend is. And it truly is just sailing, but faster and louder and more fun. And we'd love to, introduce the American sailing community to kind of the modern SailGP, because I think they'll have an awesome time. So please grab tickets, reach out to us. We'd love to show you around.